Here it is, Christmas 2006. Doesn't seem possible. Where on earth have all these years gone? Well, it was just yesterday. I was a tiny baby. And there's my mother with me as I was just a little baby. And here's another one. I was born Mariam Eileen Smith on November 16th, 1922. Well, I don't know. I guess I saved all these pictures. They're here. I didn't realize I had all these. Here's a picture of me with my older brother, Junior. And that's my mom and dad. That's their wedding picture. My parents were Denzel and Myra Frazee Smith. You know, my mom and dad got married in 1920. My father had been in the Army, and he was overseas, and he came home. He was wounded. He received the Purple Heart and the Silver Star. We are so proud of him. The Purple Heart that my father was awarded was because of being wounded when he volunteered to attempt to rescue a wounded soldier. The Silver Star was awarded for bravery above and beyond the call of duty. My paternal grandparents were John Edgar and Lily Iora Maddox Smith. They were married during March of 1893 in Indiana, I think close to Paola. And this is the Smith family picture, and I'll give you the names of my aunts and uncles. From the left, on the back row, was my Uncle Morris, and then there was Maven and Thelma, Avenel, and Tasseline. On the front row is my father, Denzel, and my grandfather, Edgar, and my grandmother, Lily, and my aunt, Elva. They had different names because my grandmother read a lot, and she would pick names from books that she had read. And they lived in Pawnee. My grandfather was a huckster. I bet you don't know what a huckster is. Huckster is one that goes around the country with a horse and wagon with supplies for the farmers and the farm wives, pots and pans and coffee and tea and that type of thing. And my grandfather did that until later he had a trucking business when trucks came into being, and that's how he made his living. My father worked on the farm, and then after he came back from the service, he went to the University of Illinois, and he studied mechanics. And that's where I was born. It was when we lived up in Champaign. And my older brother was born the year before I was, and we both lived up there. And then I think it was probably when I was about 1 that we moved to Glenarm. And my father had a job with C.H. Stradley, mechanic machine shop, and he was a blacksmith. And he learned the trade there and was a very good mechanic. And we lived in Glenarm for 3 or 4 years. In 1937, my father bought a blacksmith shop, and we moved to Chatham, and that's where I attended high school. My father, when he worked for C.H. Stradley, he made $18 a week, and we were just so happy. And we had everything we needed, and everybody else was probably in about the same boat. And I know my mother used to raise a real large garden, and she canned things, and they raised meat, and they also canned meat, and chickens. They would kill chickens and can the chickens and for our winter. And my dad always saw that we had fruit. That was his specialty. We'd go to the store, and he always saw that we had fruit to bring home. Sometimes it was oranges around Christmas time. That was about the only time you could get oranges. and bananas occasionally, but we always had apples. And I think there's probably an apple tree, but we got apples at the store a lot too. So while we lived at Glenarm, we had a Model T Ford. I'm sure it was a Model T. I don't know what other kind it would have been, but it had side curtains, and I remember my dad lighting the tail light with a match. It must have run by kerosene. I don't know how else it would have run. But that was just one of those things that I guess everybody's car must have done about the same thing. Well, Grandpa and Grandma didn't have a car. You know, they still drove the horse and surrey, or horse and buggy, no, the surrey. And that's how we went to the state fair. They came by. We were living out at Uncle Joe's farm, and they would come by and stop and pick us up, and we'd go to the state fair. Oh, that was a lot of fun. I remember that. And actually, every year I can remember, we went to the state fair at some time or other. And we'd take a lunch, and never thought about getting food poisoning at all. You just take your fried chicken and your potato salad and all of that, and we'd put the basket on I think it was a Farm Bureau tent. They had shelves there, and they gave you a number, and you put your basket up there and went about your way around the fair, came back at noon, picked it up, and had a picnic. Nobody ever got sick. Isn't that amazing? My maternal grandparents were William Allen and Mary Matilda Moore Frazee. They were married February the 8th, 1882 in Newark, New Jersey. And at one time I remember going on the train from Glenarm down to Thomasville. My grandpa and grandma Frazee, my mother's folks, lived on a farm close to Thomasville, Illinois. And we'd get on the train and go down there, and my grandfather would meet us with the wagon and the horses. And in the wintertime, Grandma Frazee always warmed some bricks or some logs in the oven and wrapped them in blankets, put them in the wagon so we would stay warm on the way home from the station. And that's a good memory. I remember that. We used to love to go to Grandpa and Grandma Frazee's. My Grandpa and Grandma Frazee came to Illinois from New Jersey. Grandpa was out here, and I don't know the reason, but my grandmother came, and they met here. And they found out that they lived only about 20 miles from each other back in New Jersey. Isn't that funny? And they were married, and my grandfather Frazee farmed on a farm east of Verdon. And the people that owned the farm, their name was Bartlett. I don't know why I remember that, but I do. But my grandfather didn't think that girls needed to go to school. So my mom only went through the 8th grade, but she went back and she took the 8th grade over the second time so she could get more subjects. My mother eventually earned her high school diploma when she was 72 through correspondence courses. And she taught music, piano. I don't know how she learned. I don't remember her saying that she took lessons, but she taught music, and she'd go from house to house with the horse and buggy. But after we kids came along, after she was married and we came along, she thought that we could learn more from somebody else. So every week she took us to Pawnee and drove the car and picked up other kids that went also from Divernon and around the neighborhood, and went to Pawnee, and we took lessons from a lady named Maud Charity Barnes. And that's an unusual name, and I always have remembered it. She was an excellent music teacher, and she was real strict on technique, and she saw that we did things right, and we did. We learned very well. My mother would sing constantly, all the popular songs. She'd go to the dime store and you could get a copy of a popular song for a nickel. and she had oodles of those, and she would play those on the piano, and then she sang around the house. Whatever she was doing, she was always singing. Sometimes there'd be a hymn from church, and many beautiful hymns, and then she'd sing popular songs, and we learned to love music a lot by listening to my mom. My parents saw that we went to church every week. Sometimes my mom couldn't go, but my dad always took us. And I remember every Sunday he lined all our shoes up on the counter and polished them every week. So we always had shoes that looked pretty good. And they taught us excellent values besides the music, and taught us to love God and country. And I have a lot of memories of living there on the farm. My Uncle Joe had a Jersey cow dairy, and he shipped milk. And I remember I used to help milk the cows when my brother Junior was sick or couldn't help. That's mainly when I did it, but I did it several times. And they always separated the milk and saved the cream and shipped that to the dairy, and had a lot of skim milk. And I remember my mother saying that she raised us kids on skim milk because Uncle Joe and Aunt Mabel gave us all the skim milk that we could use. And to this day, I like skim milk. Behind the blacksmith shop, there was a little, I think like 2 acres of grass, and we had a milk cow. And the cows, we had her up there, and she grazed there. And right alongside of the track was a traction interurban. They called it the traction. And the tracks ran right by there. One day the cow got out and got hit by the traction. She never gave milk after that, and poor thing, we had to send her to market. So that was the end of our milk, milking. So we used to have to buy milk after that at the store. So that was kind of sad because she was part of our family. Had her for years.
She didn't die, but she quit giving milk. She got hit by the train, but it didn't kill her.
Didn't kill her.
She never gave milk again.
He's died. She just stopped producing. She stopped pulling her weight.
She's out of there.
But you couldn't put her down because she was part of the family.
Her name was Bessie.
I think so. I don't remember her name.
That was good. She quit giving milk. Oh. If we can get through the rest.
When you get tired of this, we can quit. And then while we lived there, the state of Illinois tore up the road that ran north and south past the farm, and tore it up, and it was just an oiled road, and they laid concrete, and that was the start of Route 66. It went from Chicago clear out to California, I guess, eventually. But while they were working on the roads, there was a lady there that used to feed the workers, and I'd go across the road and help her. I'd set the table and that type of thing, and I thought that was big stuff, so that was fun. We walked to school most of the time. We went to Knuckles grade school. It was out in the country about 2 miles from where we lived. Most of the time we walked, but when it was real bad, Mom would have the car and she'd come and pick us up. And we took our lunch, of course, and that's about all I can remember of that. one interesting thing was, while we lived there weren't too many airplanes at that time, but there was always one that went over. I think it was about once a day. I could be wrong. It might have been every 2 or 3 days, but I think it was about once a day. It went over, and we'd go out and wave, and the pilot would tip his wings to us, and we knew who it was. It was Charles Lindbergh, and he was carrying the mail from Springfield to St. Louis. And of course that was in the papers, and we knew that. And but that was fun to go out and watch him. And my brother, Junior, that was one thing that made him think he always wanted to fly. And he did later on. He learned to fly. He was a pilot, and he flew. My dad and all my brothers served in the armed services. My dad was in World War I, and I think I mentioned that we were so proud of him, and he received the Silver Star and the Purple Heart. And then my older brother Junior served in the Navy, and he was at Pearl Harbor when the Japanese struck our fleet there. He was stationed at the hospital
were actual
in Honolulu.
that Junior
He was in the
had
Navy
taken before Pearl
and was a
Harbor,
corpsman.
and also
And,
after Pearl Harbor.
We didn't
They
hear
were
from him
found
for a
in
long
his,
time after the
things after he
Japanese
died, and
hit there.
We're going to
But
those.
we finally did, and he was all right. He was fine. So we were relieved there. I can remember where I was when I heard that on the radio that the Japanese had attacked Pearl Harbor and sunk so many of our ships. And then during the war, we had, everybody was in the same boat, but everything was rationed. You couldn't get tires for your car if you had a car, and they were rationed. And our sugar and our flour, we had to get tickets to go to the ration board and get tickets according to how many people you had in your family. And it was hard, but everybody's in the same boat, and we all did things. We saved tinfoil for the government. I don't know what they used it for, but we used to save that if we had any, and just things like that we did during the service, during the war. When I heard about the war, about the Japanese attacking, I was working over at the University of Illinois, and I was in the apartment. It was on a Sunday morning, and I think I'd already been to church. Maybe I was getting ready to go to church, and they announced that. I immediately called my parents, and they weren't home from church yet. And when they did get home, I called back, and they had not heard it. And of course, we were all concerned about my brother and the other boys, of course, that were in the service at that time. I had 3 other brothers besides my older brother. I had Harold Oliver. He was born December the 28th, 1925. And then Homer Lee, then my next brother, was born on January the 24th, 1928, I believe. And then, of course, Donnie, the youngest one, was born in 1934, March the 8th. And all my brothers during the service were members of the armed forces. In 1925, my brother Harold Oliver was born. He was active in sports and music. He played piano and sang. He joined the Army after Pearl Harbor and served in the European theater. He was in the Battle of the Bulge. After the war ended, he came back to the States, and on the way back, they came through New York Harbor and saw the Statue of Liberty. This photo is an actual photo that he took when they came back into the States. When he was home, he married Beverly June Workman. He attended Illinois State University and graduated with a degree in music. He taught music and entertained in the following years, and he also tunes pianos. He still does, and they live in the city of Normal, Illinois. Yeah, when Harold was in, he was in the European Theater, and he was in the Battle of the Bulge. And he got to entertain because he played piano, and he loved piano. He played by ear a lot. And he entertained the boys, and he got to, that was kind of a nice thing. They loved what, to be entertained, because they didn't have much entertainment over there. Oh, he sent me Hummel figurines from the factory. Harold didn't smoke, and he traded his cigarettes for those figurines and other things that he sent home. And one thing he did, he had a small picture of me that I sent while I was in the nurses training. And he saw an artist that was doing paintings there in Germany, and he had him paint this picture. And I've had that for like, I guess 60 some years. He sent it home. It's on canvas. So the artist did a pretty good job from that picture. It's been rolled up, it's all wrinkled, but I guess I should have had it put in a frame, but I didn't think I wanted to hang it on my wall, so everybody'd think, why are you doing that? In 1929, my brother, Homer Lee, was born. He was also active in sports, and during high school years, one of his jobs was to be the iceman for the town of Chatham. In 1949, he enlisted in the Army and served with the 82nd Airborne during the Korean War. He was a paratrooper, and he served his time here in the States. Afterwards, he came home and married Mary Alice Wilburn. He attended the University of Illinois and graduated with a degree in business. He worked for Illinois Bell Telephone Company for years until he retired. He now lives in Arlington Heights, Illinois. In 1934, my youngest brother, Donald Allen, was born. He was active in sports also and in music. He enlisted in the Navy and served in the Pacific Theater during the Korean War. After he came home, he married Marilyn June Parks and attended the University of Illinois, taking business courses. He became a CPA and worked in California and in Illinois, and now lives in Florida. after I graduated from high school in 1940, that summer I attended comptometer school in Springfield and learned a trade. The comptometer is a machine that multiplies and subtracts and adds and divides, and I got quite proficient on that. I really enjoyed it. It was kind of like the typewriter. I always loved to type things. But when I finished that school, I got a job over at the University of Illinois, and I worked for the ag department. And part of the time I was working for the Farm Bureau Farm Management Service. That's what the name of it was, and they've changed that since, and it's Farm Business Farm Management, I believe. Anyway, I worked in the office there and did compile the records that the farmers sent in, and they had farm managers that went out in the field and advised the farmers on what they were planting and so forth. And they kept records of how they would which crops were the most profitable and which was making the most money, and they kept track of their fertilizer and everything that they did on the farm. It was quite interesting. And when I was going to work, every morning I would go by the marrow plots that were there on campus, and they'd been there and still are there. They'd been there for years. In one part of that plot, one of the sections of the plot is continuous corn, and it shows, and they didn't put any fertilizer or anything on it. It's just continuous corn, and it shows what the corn has done over the years. And they still have that plot there. I saw it not too awful long ago, but I don't remember exactly what the other parts of the plot. I mean, some of them they put fertilizer on, some they put insecticides, some they use chemicals and so forth, but it's quite interesting. My salary there was $75 a month. You know, I thought I was rich. I guess I really was at that time, because everybody didn't make too much money when you worked, but you had to really watch your pennies, because you only got paid once a month, and you had to be sure it lasted, your money lasted the whole month. But that was fun, and I made a lot of good friends. And Velma Baylor is one of my, her name was Velma Ruth at that time, and I used to go out to their house. Her dad lived on the farm, and she had 3 brothers, and I'd go out there on the weekends. And her mother had died a few years before, and Velma always went home and washed clothes for her dad and her brothers and fixed some meals, and I used to help Velma, and I enjoyed that very much. And she's still one of my best friends today. And we correspond and talk on the phone. After I'd been over at the University of Illinois 3 years, there was a shortage of nurses. Of course, it was during the war, and so the government established the Cadet Nurse Corps, and I joined that and went into nursing at St. John's Hospital in Springfield. And practically all the girls in my class were in the Corps, in the Cadet Nurse Corps. They they paid our tuition, and they furnished our uniforms, and they gave us a monthly stipend of $20. And that was fine, because we got a room and board, and we learned a lot and made a lot of good friends in nurses training. A lot of friends I still have today. During that last year, a friend of mine introduced me to the cutest Marine, and he had the prettiest hazel eyes and was really a neat guy, and he became the love of my life.
The very thought of you, and I forget to do the little ordinary things that
We were married
everyone ought to
February the
do.
1st, 1947, and
I'm living
we
in a kind of
took a trip we took our honeymoon to the southern states, and really enjoyed that trip, and that was the first of many trips that we took during our lifetime. Merle loved to travel. I don't think I told you his name was Robert Merle Winans.
The longing here for you, you'll never know how slow the moments go till I'm near to you.
I see your face in every flower.
Your eyes in the stars above.
It's just the thought of you,
The very thought of you,
my love.
And his parents were George and Ethel Winans, and they farmed out west of Mount Auburn. And of course, when he came home from the Marine Corps, he helped his dad on the farm. And after we were married, we rented a house close to Mount Auburn and lived there, and he helped his dad. And I did some private duty nursing in Decatur.
How slow the moments go till I'm near to you.
I see your face in every flower.
Your eyes and stars above. It's just the thought of you, the very thought of you, my love.
Yeah, he was in the Marine Corps, and he was very slight of stature and just not very big at all. And I remember him saying that when he went into the service, that he ate a lot of bananas so he would weigh enough to pass his physical. Because I think he only weighed about 115 pounds. And that's one thing I remembered about him. And he was stationed in Midway Island when the Japanese hit. They had gone from Honolulu, from Pearl Harbor over to Midway, and he was stationed there at that time. He had taken his basic training at Camp Pendleton in San Diego, and then was sent out to Midway. And he was in the South Pacific for like 5 years, and he contracted malaria while he was there. But the service always gave him medication to keep the effects of the malaria from bothering them. But when he came home, of course, he went off that medication, and he was very ill there for about a year. He was really sick with malaria, and he was treated by a country doctor in Edinburgh, and he finally got better and seemed to overcome that. And And then when his dad had a heart attack in I think it was 1949, and he retired from farming, so Merle rented the farm, and we moved there in 1950. He had 3 brothers. Stop and think. George Leroy, and James William, and Glenn Richard. And they were all about 7 or 8 years apart. They were different ages, of course, and I think Merle was 18 years older than Glenn. Merle always loved farming, and
You got to have an ace in the hole, a little secret that nobody knows. Life is a gamble, a game we all play, but you need to save something for a rainy day. You've got to learn to play your cards right if you expect to win in life. Don't put it all on the line for just one roll. You've got to have an ace.
he loved animals. He had a Black Angus herd, and we also had a flock of sheep. And I loved the sheep. They were just beautiful to watch, and jumping around out in the pasture. And when we moved to the farm, it was in March of 1950, and Linda Jo was born on the 14th. And I remember it was a nice sunny day, and Merle had bought a new tractor and was down at the machine shed working on his tractor, and came up and took me to the hospital, and she was born. And we were so pleased. Never thought we'd have a girl, because there was 4 boys in Merle's family and 4 boys in mine, and I was the only girl. Never thought we'd ever have a girl. So Linda Jo was pretty special, and she was quite a charmer. May 23rd of 1951, we had our first son, and it was Bradley Owen. He was born on May 23rd, and he was quite a little character. He was a fast learner, and he soon caught up with his sister, and kept her busy. And we were amazed at what the 2 of them could do. And then 10.5 months later, here came Russell Merle. And he was a very good baby. It was a good thing, because he didn't get a whole lot of attention at that time, because we were busy with the other 2. But he turned out to be Mr. Personality, and everybody loved him. Needless to say, we were busy with the 3. They were involved in a lot of things. They took music lessons and dance lessons, and of course they had a lot of school activities after they got into school. And then we took some trips, and we went to church, and they were active there, and then took some trips. I remember one in particular, we took the three of them. They were 1, 2, and 3 to California. George and Leah, Merle's brother, and his wife and family had moved to California, so we went out to see them. And it was quite a trip. The kids, we started out ordering them, each one of them, some food at the restaurant. Well, they didn't eat that food. They just looked around at everybody else. And finally we ended up, we ordered one dish, one plate for all of them, and they still didn't eat. And finally we just ended up feeding them off of our plates. And they just bang on the table, have fun, but they didn't want to eat. So, but anyway, we used to cook. We'd rent a motel, and at that time, a lot of the motels had kitchenettes in them, and we took cooking utensils, and I had a pressure cooker, and we'd stop at the grocery store and get meat, and I'd put it in the pressure cooker with some vegetables and do that. And while I was doing that, when Merle would entertain the kids out, they would be where they have a playground where they could play and run and get some exercise, and we had a good time. About 1954, we decided there was a parcel of ground that was for sale right across the road from where we farmed, and so we decided to buy that 40 acres, and it was a very good buy. We paid $315 an acre for that, and it produced, the year we bought it, we wondered why we bought it, because our corn only made like 30 bushel to the acre overall, not just on that ground, but all the ground that we farmed. And so that really cut back on our income, and we thought, why on earth did we buy this ground? But the next year we had good crops and had good rains, and the yields went way up, and we were really fortunate, and over the years it's been a very good buy. And on the farm that we bought, we put a pond down at one corner of it, and it was for conservation, and also the kids used it for recreation. They did a lot of swimming and ice skating and of course fishing, and we did a lot of picnics and had a good time down around the water. Okay. Now, in 1956, Walt Disney built Disneyland in California in June, and during the Christmas vacation, we took the kids and went out to visit George and Leah and got to go to Disneyland, and that was quite something. It was something that nobody around here had ever seen. We really enjoyed that. Yeah, we also went to see the Rose Bowl parade on January the 1st, and Grandma Winans was there and kept the little kids while we went to the parade. But I enjoyed it so much that I took 2 of my grandsons and my daughter, and we went out in like 40 years later to see the Rose Parade, and I enjoyed it, and I think they did. the thing that struck me most was the smell of the flowers. They were just wonderful and so fresh, and something that you didn't experience back here, especially in the wintertime. And I really enjoyed that and was so glad to go back. November the 26th, 1958, our fourth child was born, and that was Curtis Ray. And he was such a joy to have. We just really enjoyed him. And he was a friend to everybody. Everybody liked Kurt, and he liked everybody. We had Curtis all right, but we couldn't think of a middle name, so Uncle Don said, well, why don't you just name him Curtis Ray? And I said, well, that sounds like a good name. He was a cute little fella. He was friends to everybody, and he still is. Then in 1960, in February, we had our fifth child, and that was Alexander Robert. And he was born, he had his daddy's birthmark. His sister came in and said he's got his daddy's birthmark. He had the outline of the state of Illinois on his forehead. And I said, well, then we have to keep him. You know, we can't deny him. So we're really glad we kept him, because he's been such a good help to all of us for over the years, and he can do anything. He's just really a good kid. And then in 1960, in June, I lost my father, and he was such a wonderful dad. He just was good to all of us kids. He couldn't hardly discipline us, but he was pretty firm, but he didn't like to discipline us. But he set a very good example, and he went to church every Sunday, and if Mom couldn't go for some reason, he took all of us kids. And every Sunday I remember that he polished our shoes. He'd line them up on the counter, and he'd polish them all so they all looked good. And he would repair our shoes. Of course, during the Depression years, why, we didn't have a lot of money, and everybody, I think, was in the same boat. But he would even resole the shoes and put new heels on them if they needed it. So he was really a handyman. He could just do about anything. So to this day, I really miss my dad. Dad always prayed before meals. And I remember seeing my mom and dad saying bedtime prayers. They would kneel on each side of the bed, one on one side and one on the other, and say their evening prayers. And so they were really a good example for us. Yes, in August of 1980, my beloved mother passed away, and she had pancreatic cancer, and and she's buried at Chatham in the spot next to my father. And she was always so good to come and help me when the kids were little, and after their father passed away especially, she came and helped me a lot. So I really miss her. When we lived in Glenarm, we attended the was the Methodist Episcopal at that time church, and was very active in that. My mother was the pianist there, and I had very good Sunday school teachers, and the people were just wonderful. And that's when I became a Christian, was during those years. I can't remember a specific time. I just remember that I always was. And that's been a big thing in my life ever since. It's just part of me. I need to go to church. I can't stay away. I have to be there at certain times. And so the Lord's really been good to me. Yeah, I raised my family, and I've got a plaque on my wall that me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And in October then of 1963, our sixth child was born, and we named him Benjamin Smith. And the kids really thought he was special, and they still do to this day. He was such a good-natured baby. He, of course, he had to be, because he had to share all that attention with all the rest of them. But he really was a good-natured child, and he is special to this day. So, yeah, this was taken out in California, and Uncle Don took that picture. We were down on by the ocean on the wharf, and he took that picture. I had wonderful in-laws. George, I always called him Dad Winans. He was so good to me, and he loved my kids. He would tell me how healthy they looked, and then he'd also tell me how good a farmer that Merle was. And I reminded him that Merle was a good farmer, but he also had a lot of new things to work with that Dad didn't have when he started farming. And then Dad Winans passed away in September of 1955. And I still think about him, and I really loved him. Then my mother-in-law, Ethel, I could do no wrong. She always thought I was tops. And maybe it was because she never had a daughter until Leah and I came, and then of course she had two more later. And she helped me so much after Merle died, and she would come and keep the kids, or she would cook something, bake something for me. And then she passed away in January of 1978. And I really miss both of them. I loved them very much. So, a lot of times during the summer, practically every summer, Jim and Dixie would bring their kids to the farm, and they stayed for several weeks, and they weren't always all with us, but part of the time they were, and they learned how it is to work and how you make a living on the farm. So they helped with walking beans and feeding the cattle and the ponies and mowing the yards and that type of thing. And of course they had a lot of fun too while they were there. And part of the time they stayed with Grandma Ethel, and part of the time they would be up at Uncle Dan Kemp's, and I think he lived in Lexington at that time. in 1967, we began to think about building a house on the ground that we had, and picked out a spot where we wanted to build. And then the first thing they did, I think, was to establish a lawn. And then we had some small trees that we already had started in our garden, and we transported those on up to the new project. And your dad made a plan how he liked to have the trees situated, and he even drew out some plans that where they would be and everything. And then we recruited the boys to go with water in they took the pickup truck and a horse tank of water in the back, and they'd go up and water these trees every day. Well, not every day, about every 2 or 3 days they'd go. And that was quite a project. And I think they probably got tired of it, but it really helped establish those trees. And then Merle sent off for plans at different places, and we picked out one that we thought we'd like, and made a few changes in it. And Merle decided that he could build this house himself. And so he started out, and I was amazed at how talented he was. He could figure out anything. He was kind of like my dad in that fashion, that he could remember, or he could figure out what needed to be done. So he started the house, and he taught the boys how to build and do different things. And we had more than one hammer. Somebody said we only had one hammer for the whole house, but that's not true. He had more than one hammer, and he used a generator to do his sawing and so forth. And they did all but the brickwork and the electrical work they didn't do. And I think they could have done that and probably done a better job than the people that did it. Well, not the electric work, but the brickwork wasn't all that great, but it was pretty nice. And so it was about 4 years later that we decided, we weren't completely done, but we decided we'd go ahead and move into the house. So we did. We moved in April of 1971, and we moved up there, and we were so glad we did. We enjoyed the house so much. It was a beautiful location for a house. You could see beautiful sunrises and sunsets. Sometimes you could see the sun setting on the west and the moon coming up on the east, and that was really, really something we enjoyed. But we really weren't meant to enjoy that together too long. And in August of 1971, Merle suffered a heart attack and passed away. And he's buried at Edinburgh, close to his parents, and there's a spot saved there for me. When we went to harvest the beans, a lot of the neighbors came in and helped. It was just amazing. They had so many combines and trucks, and then they came back for corn, and the boys had already harvested most of it. They went right ahead. They didn't wait for somebody to do it. It was very difficult to adjust to widowhood. It always had somebody to help me with the kids and to listen. And we talk about so many different things, and seemed like for years afterwards I'd think, oh, I'll go home and tell Merle this, and of course he wouldn't be there. But the neighbors and my friends and my church family were so good to me, and the Lord was just right there with me all the time. And so we survived, and the kids grew, and the older kids helped with the younger kids. They would stay and take care of them when I'd have to be gone. And when Ben got into school, then I took a refresher course and started back into nursing. And it was kind of good to be back. I said, of course, there was a lot of changes in the field of nursing in 20 years. I'd been out 20 years, but I really enjoyed it. And after Merle died, then I went full-time. I went part-time at first, and then I went full-time. And the older kids really helped me with the younger ones. They'd look after them, and so I don't know what I would have done without my whole family. In my whole life, I've always enjoyed traveling. And after we were married, Merle especially enjoyed. When he went to the South Pacific and he was out in California, he just was so enthused with it. And I really enjoyed all the trips. He showed me a lot of different places, and we went a lot of to different areas and different states. And it was really great. One of my favorite places was Corbilla Monument on Point Loma in California. And the ocean is so majestic. It was just wonderful. All these trips have been great. When we traveled, Merle always would stop at all the historical markers. And he'd make the kids get out of the car and go over and read them. And they didn't always want to do it, and they probably didn't remember it until maybe years later. And then they say, well, we were there. We read that sign that told about the area. And he was just really liked to make sure that the kids were aware of what we were doing and where we were. One time when we were on a trip and we were crossing the desert, we broke a fan belt on the car. And we were out there in the middle, and it was warm, and of course they lost all the water in the car. And Merle took the boys had received Boy Scout ropes for Christmas, so he took those ropes and he braided them and made a fan belt. And then he poured the water that one of them had in the canteen, and then he took the thermos jug, and there was an irrigation ditch not very far from where we were. So he took one of the ropes, I don't know which one, and tied it to the thermos jug and went down into the edge of the irrigation ditch and dipped water and filled the radiator with that. And the kids were just amazed at how he did that. They couldn't believe it. But he'd been trained in the Marine Corps, and he knew how to make knots in the ropes and all that type of thing. But that was one time when the kids learned a lot. When we got to the service station, the fellow there, he looked at that and he said, boy, that's using your Yankee ingenuity, making the fan belt out of ropes. And the kids were just really amazed.
Get your kicks on Route 66. Well, it winds from
one thing that we'll probably never see again, when we were traveling through the parts of California that were all desert and sand dunes, we saw the wooden planks from one of the first roads that they'd ever put through.
they were there just in pieces, but you could see where the highway had gone. But the sand would cover them up, and they'd have to come out and uncover them, and that was quite a thing when they first developed roads out to the west.
Oh, that was the next time we went out, because we had Kurt and Alex then when we went. And I was looking around, and I couldn't see Kurt. And of course, I kind of panicked in the big crowd, and Alex was in a stroller. And I said to your dad, I said, "Where's Kurt? Where's Kurt?" He said, "You're holding him, dummy." And there I had him in my arms, but I couldn't see him, so I was just looking around. But that was one of the funny things.
again some sunny day. Oh, keep smiling through, just like you always do, till the blue skies drive the dark clouds far away. So won't you please say hello to the folks that I know? Tell them I won't be long. They'll be happy to know that as you saw me go, I was singing this song. We'll meet again, I don't know where, and I don't know when, but I know we'll meet again some sunny day. I won't be long. They'll be happy to know that as you saw me go, I was singing this song. We'll meet again, I don't know where, and I don't know when, but I know again some sunny day. Waking skies at sunrise, every sunset too seems to be bringing me memories of you. Here and there, everywhere, scenes that we once knew, and they all just recall memories of you. How I wish I could forget those happy that have left a rosary of tears. Your face beams in my dreams, spite of all I do. Everything seems to bring memories of you. How I wish I could forget those happy yesteryears that myself all I do. Everything seems to bring memories of you. Time was when we had fun on the schoolyard swing, when we exchanged graduation rings, one lovely yesterday. Time was when we wrote love letters in the sand, or lingered over our coffee and dreaming the time away. Picnics and hay rides and midwinter sleigh rides, and never apart. Hikes in the country, there's more than one tree on which I've a place in your heart. Darling, every tomorrow will be complete if all our moments are half as sweet as all our time